Hi, it's Retro Nerd Girl, and I'm broadcasting from the International Science Fiction Space Station. And guys, I have a movie that I just saw. I just saw this movie. This is it. Ah! Yes, guys, I finally saw the Andromeda Strain, and I absolutely love it. Let me think about my score because it's a high score. It's a high score. It's a high score. And the thing about this is that when I was done watching the movie, I kind of was like, I had to sit with it for a few moments, and I was like, yeah, yeah, this is brilliant. Yeah, yeah. So I do have some nitpicks about the movie, though. So it's not entirely perfect. Well, we'll get into the nitpicks at about along the way. Let's just sum up the movie. I'm going to be using Wikipedia to help me out with this. I know that Wikipedia isn't 100% correct on everything, but this is what we're going to use for now. So this is the Andromeda Strain, 1971 American science fiction thriller film produced and directed by Robert Wise. Oh my goodness. And he's just one of those directors that has done so many wonderful films. For instance, he's done The West Side Story, The Sound of Music. He edited Citizen Kane, The Hindenburg, 1975, The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951, and Star Trek: The Motion Picture, 1979. Incredible. Just amazing. You can see his work in this film was absolutely stunning and wonderful. I'm a huge fan, and yes, he is fantastic. The film was based on Michael Crichton's 1969 novel, The Andromeda Strain, and it's adapted by Nelson Gidding. The film stars Arthur Hill, James Olsen, Kate Reed, and David Wayne. And they are playing a team of scientists who investigate a deadly organism of extraterrestrial origin. The film starts off with this, and it's a bit of fiction, but reads like fact. Fiction that reads like fact. It says here, acknowledgements. This film concerns the 4-day history of a major American scientific crisis. We received the generous help of many people attached to Project Scoop at Vandenberg Air Force Base and the Wildfire Laboratory in Flat Rock, Nevada. They encouraged us to tell the story accurately and in detail. They start off giving us a feel of maybe this could be real. Maybe this could be real. Huh? Conspiracy theory. Very nice. We have more documents that are being faded in and out of the credits. It looks incredible, especially since there were no computers back then to facilitate this. This had to be done practically. It looks fantastic. So there's a whole bunch of little documents about things being top secret and really sets the mood quite nicely. Project Scoop mission. This file is classified top secret. Examination by unauthorized persons is a criminal offense punishable by fines and imprisonment of up to 20 years and $20,000. So yes, prying eyes must stay away. So this all starts off on a more serious note. So Project Scoop basically is a satellite that is sent into outer space to collect material that may or may not be dangerous to humans. And so I believe initially it was to seek out a biological weapon of destruction. They were hoping that it was something that they could control. They have different satellites out there, and they've named them. And this one is called Scoop 7. And Scoop 7 has collected some data and has landed somewhere near this town, Piedmont, New Mexico. And the population there is 68 people. Unfortunately, somehow it got to this town and actually made a huge mess. You can see that there are persons not alive there. And so it is if you're going to look at this movie, which is rated G, just know that there are a few images that may be more for older. It is not G. All I could say is not G. Is probably PG-13, if at all. But it's only this part of the film the beginning, probably 15 minutes. It's very strong visual, very graphic in a way, but not awfully graphic. But there are some moments that may be disturbing and may keep you up at night for a couple of days. So just letting everyone know that that is a feature that happens in the film, and it affected me in a way as well. There are two men out there on the field that are military men who are trying to get their hands on this scoop, and as soon as they get close, well, they lose communication with the main base. People are taking this very, very serious, and they're like, well, we don't have any communication coming out of the town, and we just lost two guys. There's a big problem. We've got here somebody by the name of General Sparks, and he says, there's been a fire. And that is the code word for saying, like, hey, we got a real problem on our hands. And I do love that. The first person that they contact is who? Dr. Jeremy Stone, who is the only person who actually really knows what could be happening. He's the only one who's imagined it, who's theorized upon the idea that maybe there could be an alien spore out there that could hurt humans. And so he has some very good ideas of how maybe to deal with it. And one of them happens to be a location by the name of Wildfire. And Wildfire is a facility that he kind of dreamt up and has asked the government to fund, and which they have, but they have not had a need to use it until now. And so he's having a good time with his wife, and they are having a dinner party, and it's interrupted by military men who are taking him away. They say, there's been a fire, and he also knows what that means. So that means you've got to go. And so he doesn't want to go. Him and his wife have a really great relationship. Because of his duty, he must go. He must go. What they're doing is that they're putting together a dream team, if you will, of elite scientists to deal with this situation. So I've told you about Dr. Stone, who is basically going to be the ringleader. He's going to be leading the expedition for all of these things. Then there is Dr. Mark Hall, who is a surgeon. Dr. Charles Dutton, who I believe is an autopsy specialist, and we have Dr. Ruth Levitt, who I believe is also another kind of biologist. Unlike the two other people who went into the town before without any kind of protection, these guys are all suited up with airtight suits. They almost look like astronauts going into space, but it's really funny to see them kind of just going to a plain old town in the middle of America. It's the one thing that's protecting them at this point, because whatever it is, it's definitely airborne and it's quick. At least we can assess that, and they don't know that yet. As they're walking around, they are finding people who are unalive all over the place, and it's just really horrible. It's really a terrible sight to see. It's not for the faint. And so I do suggest that if you do have any little ones, or if you don't feel really good about watching that kind of stuff, you can fast forward it and it'll be fine. Actually, I would suggest that anybody at this point, and we're going to go into full spoilers, but if you wanted to take a look at the movie, go ahead and come back. But if you've seen it already, and or you just want to hear what I have to say about it with no plans on watching it, just keep on watching and I'll keep on talking. And so, yes, they are mortified by what they're seeing. They're trying to understand, how is this happening? People have basically fallen right where they are. It is very weird to see people in the middle of doing stuff, and just it leaves the audience with a sense of dread, and it leaves you with a sense of confusion, because you don't know what's happening. How did this happen? So there are many people who've died many different ways, because it looks like there are some people who just stopped living, and then there are some people who continued to live, but they took their own lives. And that is also another horrible thing to have to witness in this movie. And they show you some rather graphic moments, but nothing bloody or anything like that. It's just something you never want to see. It's like, no. And there's also the theory that some of them were slowly dying and in pain, and so this was to put them out of their misery, as whatever it is in the air was affecting them like this. And so they do catch up with the two young men that were there to retrieve the scoop before, and unfortunately they have expired. They are finally drawn to the scoop satellite, and they are able to find out what happened. Basically, someone took this to the doctor's office in town. I know, the doctor's office. And he decided to do a little investigating. So he opened up the hatch inside of the scoop and let out the pathogen. And so whatever it is, it's airborne for sure. And so that's really quite sad. They were trying to then figure out why he passed on, what was it. And when they cut into his arm, his blood was all powder. It is all powder, and everybody's blood is all powder. They hear a baby crying and they're like, what? They go to the baby, but the baby unfortunately never stops crying throughout the entire movie. So if so that's one. And it adds another layer. And then there's this crazy guy who comes out of nowhere and he's like, it's all your fault, you did this to us. And then he falls to the ground clutching his stomach and passes out. It's just one of those things where you're just like, okay, is he sick? Did he die? What happened? And so he's indeed one of the survivors. So that's the only survivors was a baby and a guy who's probably not all there. One other thing I'd like to say about this scene in particular, which is a small critique. There are buzzards in the area. There's a whole bunch of them that were just swarming around, waiting to get a hold of, trying to eat essentially any of the expired people. And so, since the pathogen was airborne, they should have died. They should have died pretty much instantly. And so that was a moment in which I think they dropped the ball on that. Another thing I wanted to mention is that the music that is being used is so unique, and it is reminiscent of the music that was used for Forbidden Planet, where you weren't really using instruments that were typical of a score. You were using unusual instruments, if you will, and it's definitely prevalent here. That must have been their inspiration. It had to have been their inspiration because it really sounds a lot like that kind of music. Not a specific beat. It's just kind of offshoots of different tones here and there, and what they had called in that movie tonalities. And I think they really was inspired by that. They were inspired by that. It's really cool. So one of the things that they want to do is they want to destroy this town in 24 hours. So they put out a special request to the president to do that. But there is some bureaucracy involved. Then we have Dr. Ruth Levitt, who is actually a very interesting character. She is definitely wouldn't be considered the main character because I don't think there really is one. She's the one character that really does get a chance to really, really shine. And her personality is not a very likable one, though. And so that's very interesting. They bring this character to Wildfire, which is in Nevada. It is under the cover of the Department of Agriculture. And as they're going into the building here, there's a red light outside, and she's like, oh, I hate red light. And she makes a joke about it. Kind of makes you kind of warm up to it. It's like, oh, she's making a little joke. It turns out it means something a little bit later. When they go into this place, they go into a storeroom, and that storeroom takes them down below ground to where the facilities are. It's really well done because they use a lot of split screens, and it looks really great to tell the story without having to go back and forth to the different characters or guess what's happening. They actually have a little animation showing you that they're going several feet underground. Great job. I love that. Great visual storytelling. And then they go through a series of doors, and just to further show that this place is heavily fortified. You have extreme security. No one can just walk right in. You need security clearance, and it's of the toppest notch. This facility, though, is remarkable, and it has there's here. This is a little diagram of what it is. We get more of that in the shape of interesting little computer displays. These were all done practically. Let's see. There are 5 levels. We've got the first level is red. The second level is orange. The third level is blue. The fourth level is yellow. And the last one is white. As you go further down into this facility, the more sterile, the people and the things are. So you have to go through, as you go through all the levels, you also have to go through the levels of sterilization. That's actually a whole nother like 15 minutes that they devote to that. It's really cool. And I guess it's what they would call world building. I mean, they could have literally come up with a TV show just about this location, Wildfire, and just set upon all sorts of different little exploration or little situations that they have to, little fires, so called, that they have to put out. It's really cool. And so they have this wonderful little display that or graphic that they show us. And, of course, at 1971, they did not have that available to the public or to anyone. And so this is all done practically with using gel sheets, projections on white paper. And yeah, it looks great. Looks great. Every floor level has a certain color. So they made this an incredible set. They couldn't make a brand new set for every single color. So what they did was, as the cast had to go through the different levels, they changed the paint on each level. So that's actually kind of a nice way to save money is just keep on painting over the set. And it's actually a pretty nice paint job too. And here's where it was when it was red. It looks really good. This is the communications center, and they talk to this guy who is a communications operator. And there's kind of a funny moment with him in this. This is like the only joke you probably get in the movie, like a real joke. They're asking him, well, did anything, any messages come out? And he's like, I'm sure. And like, are you really sure? And he's like, he goes through this entire explanation of what is going on here. And so he's most likely have heard multiple times during the day people asking him that same question, and he's just tired. Now, I also like the fact that they do show you the inner workings of this machine that they're receiving information on, because it comes into play later on. They set something up, and then they paid it off at a later point in time in the story. So I do love all the setups and payoffs. It really does matter to a good story. They have all of these weird machines and weird ways of sterilizing the body and making sure that you're ready and fit for the next level. Um, not all of it is pleasant. I don't think any of it is pleasant. It's like very torturous. And this one kind of reminded me of Zardoz a little bit with the mirrors. And but in this particular scene, which I thought was very interesting, is that they removed a few layers of your skin by burning it off, and this white residue is the ash that's left behind. Very, very creative in that respect. They were getting different treatments, and so they finally make it to the area where they can work. The entire room is sealed. There are some test subjects for them to use to see what the response will be if they are exposed to scoop 7. So they put this monkey in here. Now, they did do this very, very safely for the monkey, but I still don't like it at all. I don't like it. But it wasn't like, it was traumatized, but it wasn't killed. It looks pretty bad. I was like, did they really have to kill this monkey for this thing? But they didn't. They didn't kill him. But they said that he was just fine afterwards. Again, I think this is where, like, I don't mind seeing a CGI monkey in a cage. It was really hard to watch it. Let's just put it like that. Dr. Charles Dutton is looking after all of the autopsies. They have to do different tests and how and see if there's anything that they can glean from this. So they're doing all their tests on lab mice and monkeys. So what he was able to figure out was that from breathing it in, it spreads out into the rest of the body. And so that was the way that they were able to figure that out. Then we have these two here looking to see if they can find anything on the satellite. And this was a very interesting scene, guys. It is a lot like the scene in Blade Runner when Deckard has to find something in a picture. They actually do something like this in here, and it's really interesting. First, we'll see that Dr. Levitt is a little bit, either she's tired, they haven't gotten any sleep, or she's having problems with her eyes. So there's a few things where we're not sure what's happening, what's going on with Dr. Levitt. You know, she's not 100% at top form, and so there's something going on with her. As they've been looking at Scoop 7, they've been looking on the outside, and she's been bickering for a long time for them to look inside of the actual scoop and see what's in there. And finally, after much of her nagging, they finally do, and that's when they actually do find something. So as they're like looking at this thing, it's really interesting to see this, how they're able to isolate this thing and actually zoom in. They get to see it, and it's basically a little piece of something that looks like a rock, and it's got green slime on it. And I was immediately thought of the movie Green Slime. I was like, oh no. They're not sure, like, if it's an organism or what it is. And I think for humans, anything that is a bright green we consider alien or strange or unusual. Green, oh my god, that's got to be aliens, some kind of alien sludge. They really have a good focus on it, and for a moment, for a split second, it looked like it moved. The only person who saw it was Levitt, and Levitt is like, she's like, oh no, what's going on with my eyes? And maybe it's my eyes, I can't see. And then the two of them are like isolating this thing more, and then they notice that it does change, and it has these, yes, and these hexagons are appearing, and it is very interesting. The music to accompany this moment is so creepy, and it gets under your skin, and you're on alert when you hear this music. It's like, what is that? And it's beautifully crafted. It's beautifully crafted. I absolutely loved that moment. I'm like, that is how you build fear on a very primal level, because it's with the music or the sound that was being amplified along with the visuals, kind of made you like, what is happening here? It's really fantastic. At about the same time all of this is happening, there is a pilot who is flying over Piedmont. He's got all this green stuff on him. Unfortunately, he crashes his plane jet. There are some military people to come and retrieve this stuff. So if indeed that man was affected by the pathogen, why are these guys okay? All of this stuff should be contaminated, and they should be having problems right now, but they're not. So maybe there is a reason we can give it. We could give it a couple of different reasons, but technically it should not, they should not be walking around right now. They should all have fallen right where they stood. It is just something that's very perplexing. It's very perplexing. And then they find the pilot has been reduced to just bones, very clean bones. And it is very perplexing to me what happened to his body. What they discovered, or they hypothesized, is that the spore or whatever it is, pathogen, likes to eat plastics, and his face mask was made with a special plastic, and so perhaps the reaction caused this complete and total disintegration of his organic material. And so this is really interesting, fascinating, but it was not fully explained. Unfortunately, you've got to explain these things. So yeah, unfortunately, I did not love that, but I will let it slide for all of the other incredible things that are in this movie. So we're back to Dr. Levitt, and what they're trying to do is figure out if there's a way to stop these things from growing. She is examining all of the cultures that she has or they have collected. She finally finds one. This part where it says no growth, right? And if you see down below, it says alkaline. So alkaline prevents growth. While she's looking at this, she's just is kind of frozen, and she just sits like this for like hours and hours and hours. Like this is like hours later, and she's still like stuck like that. And it is kind of shocking because I was like, oh my God, can they hypnotize her? I was so afraid. I was like, oh no, they can hypnotize you. Or I thought maybe the spores had gotten out, and I thought, oh no, that it's killing her right now. But when she actually stops doing this, the entire scan that she was doing is over, and she missed the opportunity to find out what would stop the growth of this organism. And so she is very upset and very bitter about it, very angry about it. So when she meets with the others, my God, she really tears into them really good. Kind of the thing that's a lot of people do as a defense mechanism to cover up anything that's going on with them. And so I guess she doesn't want to like tell the truth of what's happening, even though it might save some lives or it might shed some answers for them, but she just keeps it to herself. While they're gathering for a meeting, they realize that, oh, all this time there hasn't been any calls coming in. We don't know if a bomb had been dropped on Piedmont like they were supposed to. There just isn't a whole lot of communication going back and forth. But they hit like one of the buttons on one of the things, and then it just spouts out all of this stuff. One of the things that it spouts out is they have named the strain or the organism as the Andromeda strain. Do do do. I thought that was really cool, and yeah, they're waiting and waiting for phone calls, but it looks like there's a malfunction in that machine that technician has that really needs a repair. The other thing is that in Washington there are two groups of people. There's one guy who's a little bit more, we'll do everything that you guys tell us to do. And then there's another guy who's a little bit more hesitant. Ask the president, and we'll see if he wants to do that. I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do. At first, you're in agreement on the side of the scientists, and you're like, yeah, why aren't you listening to these guys? They're the experts. But this other guy who's kind of like reserved about it, he's actually like, you know, he's actually proven to be right ultimately at the end, and I will fill you in on that when it comes about. They're doing everything they can, and so now they've isolated the organism, and they've got this small cell, which seems like, oh yes, we've got this located. You put it on a petri dish and you don't think about it anymore. They're discussing the logistics of how an organism like this would work, and we have Levitt explaining what she knows about this kind of a structure. So it's kind of cool. They're all putting their minds together and coming up with some more detail, and also it seems like they're getting a handle on that. Just as they're talking, the thing expands. Which is like, oh my goodness, and it makes that sound. It's like, it's like, oh my God, it's expanding. And then you think that's it. It continues to expand. It's wonderful. And so yeah, I love that. And it's just triangles and that are on top of each other, and it looks great. I love it. So they start to look at some options of where a bio war would happen. This is something that Jeremy Stone pulls out these maps, and Dr. Dutton and Dr. Levitt are like, "What is going on here? You knew about this?" I mean, it's very sus. You know what I mean? It's very sus. So yeah, there it says by a war map, as if they knew it was going to happen, and it wasn't that they knew it was going to happen. They thought it was going to happen, and also, the government was running these scoop programs. He did not know about that. The loss of life on Piedmont and this whole thing is really basically the government's own fault. We've got to go through all this rigmarole to even get things to be done. There's a lot of bureaucracy going on that's impeding progress. It's very clear to me, based on the story, that it was an accident, but they thought they were going to be able to control it, and they can't. But as they're looking at this thing, they're like, wait a minute, we can't nuke this thing. It's going to make it grow exponentially. So there's a huge push to try to stop them from bombing Piedmont, because it would cause a catastrophe of insane proportions. Oh my gosh, they just asked for the place to be bombed, and now they're asking it for it not to be bombed. It just, again, shows that they don't know what they're doing. They're finding their way through it. It is a really good testament to the beauty of science, of people who know science and the answers that they can come up with, but also knowing that they can be faulty, they can make mistakes, they can also not really know the answer. And that's one thing that this movie also sheds a light on. And I did enjoy that, because it's more real to life. I think it's more real to life than we have magical doctors that make everything amazing. We'd love that. That would be great. That would be awesome. But in real life, when faced with a pathogen like this, where do you start? I respect the art of science, and I do respect. We also have to understand that they're not perfect. They're not gods, and they're people capable of mistakes and miss theories. Yeah. Not mysteries, but miss theories, or theories that are completely defunct and too good to be true. So I would say, as a thread line through the entire film, Dr. Mark Hall is really the most like a main character that we get in the story. I think it's between him and Levitt. There is more focus between those two. Mark, ever since really picking up the two survivors, has been extremely obsessed with finding out why they are the survivors, and perhaps they have the answer to figuring out exactly what is going on here, or figuring out how to save people, possibly, or maybe there's an antidote, maybe there's a way for them to save their own life. The man in this situation, the older man, is very, very bitter and angry. He does not want to give up any information. And so he's actually impeding the progress here. And maybe he doesn't understand the weight of all of this, but he is unwilling to even talk about the situation that happened at Piedmont. So this is really causing a big problem to solving the case. And it's really one of those moments that I'm like frustrated. Can somebody please explain to this man that he needs to say something, or he needs to help the doctors to figure out what's going on. He's really very quiet. And of course, the baby can't say much because it's crying all the time. All the time it's crying. One thing about Mark Hall is that Dr. Hall is a single man. And so he does have a certain flirty kind of thing going on with this nurse here. Nurse Karen Anson. They're actually a good team together. They're actually getting the job done. Yeah, there are some mini sparks flying. He is, since he got there, he's just been kind of flirty as much as possible. He's like always flirting with the computer voice, which is a very feminine voice. It turns out that the voice, the lady who's voicing the computer, is actually 63 years old, and he's kind of like, okay, I guess I can't flirt with the lady in the computer. So it's really kind of funny. That was the other like little, big joke in the story, just to lighten things a little bit, which I thought was really cool. This older man is actually puts his hand on the nurse's backside, which is highly inappropriate, but she handles it very well. And it's enough to get him to start talking. If that works, hey, we might actually save some lives at the same time. So finally, we get something out of him. He says that the baby's been crying since he was born. He himself has a stomach problem. He also drinks this stuff called fleas, and so it is something that is making his stomach highly acidic. We already established that something is making something alkaline will work, right? Because of the test that these guys don't know about yet, that alkaline will work, but also acidic will also work as well. That is the key. They don't really get a chance to do that very much because there is an alarm that goes off. It looks like somebody has been exposed to the pathogen, and there has been when the alarm goes off, Dr. Levitt is walking down the hall and suddenly freezes up when she sees this red light. Red light really messes with her. She's looking at the red light, and I was like, oh no, they have possessed her now. She's possessed. Oh no, she's possessed. They got her. Oh no. And so, or no, I was like, oh, or maybe it's been released and now she's dying. Oh no. Pretty much immediately, almost immediately, Dr. Hall knows what's going on. See, this is why I think it's so important that he's there. He sees what's going on and he's like, oh no, she's having a seizure. That's what she's been keeping under wraps, that she has epilepsy, and red lights really does her in. He's able to get her to lay down and ask for a syringe full of some medicine for her. The trust that he has built with this nurse is what allows the nurse to come close and trust him and administer this medicine to Dr. Levitt. And it's very important because without that, this whole scene falls apart. So they have already built this really cool trust with each other by working together, and this is what creates that bond. And so I love that. I was like, oh, so this is the payoff for them working together and spending so much time together. And this is the payoff for Dr. Levitt, because the whole time she has been yelling and screaming at at everybody. She's been so nasty to Dr. Hall, and he hasn't been that great either. It's kind of nice that he was the one to save her. So we have Dr. Dutton here. This isn't the exact scene. He is afraid for his life, and they are trying to switch mess with the air so that way he can have a better chance to live. And so he's just panicking, he's freaking out, and then and then I thought this was the funniest scene. Dr. Hall comes in, he's like, oh no, remove the oxygen and have him breathe fast, because if you don't have enough time to catch your breath, it changes your pH balance in your blood. And so that's what's keeping the baby alive. And so I thought that was really cool. I was like, oh wow. I don't know how true it is. But it was a cute little detail that was able to, make its way to the story and work somehow. But he doesn't get to implement it because guess what? The pathogen is no longer dangerous. What? We've been working on this pathogen, trying to make sure that it's okay. It's no longer dangerous, guys. I just was like, okay, I guess that's over. That was really crazy, but yes, that's how pathogens are. They are dangerous one minute and then they're not, and it's really wild because they mutate and they change. And so yeah, sometimes they get worse, sometimes they get better. The alarms are still going. They're not. There's a countdown to the total destruction of the place. So people are going crazy, and it's like it's pandemonium. I go back to the beginning here on this. This is a story piece that is sort of played out throughout the story. They do bring it up a couple of times, which is I thought was really nice. So in the beginning, they are trying to figure out who will be the person to ultimately judge the situation and save Wildfire. If there's a situation just like this where there's alarms going off and there's a countdown, the first thing they decide is that they will pick the odd man. And the odd man in this story is Dr. Hall, because he is an unmarried man. According to their theory, is that he is able to make level-headed decisions. He will not be swayed in by his determination to save his own family. He will make a decision that is fair to everyone. And so I thought that was interesting. That was an interesting concept. And I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure if that's true, if that would work in a situation like this. But in this case, Hall has compassion. And as soon as he hears about this and he has to do this, it's just been jumbled up in his head the whole time. This is what the key looks like. It's the red key here. The white key is when you want to turn on the detonator, and the red key is when you want to turn it off. Dr. Hall is like, he's just contemplating it from the moment he gets it, trying to figure out like, when will I have to use this? And when I use this, will it be the right decision? It's really playing heavily on his mind. He does have to use it at the end to stop the computer from counting down. And so he is absolutely beside himself, trying to get to a location to cut off the countdown. He goes through like trial by fire, up the stairs, through this thing here. And it is an exciting moment in this otherwise very clinically processed movie. So the movie's tone is very blasé, intellectual, very much about learning about this place, this facility, and learning about the procedures and trying to learn about the alien. But then you get to this part where it's about saving everybody. And it was like, it turns into an action movie in the last like 10 minutes, and it's glorious. It really is. And so we have Dr. Hall just doing his best to get to the place in which he can detonate that bomb. And he just makes it. Just makes it. And with quite a bit of suffering, he does save everyone. And at this hearing that they're kind of retelling, all of this is being told at a hearing. So this is really interesting. Everything that I just explained to you are events that were done a year prior. So this is very, very important. They're just assessing what they'll need to do. And it kind of leaves you ominously sort of like, yeah, there may be more spores like this. There may be another. We need to be ready. And so that is the lasting moment in this film, which I like. I also managed to get these really cool shots. I got Douglas Trumbull here working on visual effects, and some more really cool shots that they took, more interiors and stuff. Very cool. Contagion is another movie that was released, and this is actually a more recent movie that was released that was concerning something of a similar nature. There's quite a few others, though. I am not going to name all of those movies, but we did get the 2008 movie starring Benjamin Bratt, The Andromeda Strain. It says, it's a bad day to be human. Very interesting. Yeah, I've never seen it. I heard it's, of course, probably not as good as the original, just because we're talking about how do you do it better than Robert Wise, right? How do you do it better than Robert Wise? But this was a mini series, and that was a TV mini series where they could add a lot more and do a whole lot more. Michael Crichton did write a sequel called The Andromeda Evolution. I'm not sure if that's any good. So if anybody out there has read this book, please let me know if it's good. And yeah, that's Andromeda Strain. Once again, the music was spectacular. It was spectacular, and it was spectacularly used. I do love the way it was used in the film so brilliantly and created that fear. Just wonderful. I love the color blocking. And, when they were on the red floor, everybody wore red. It was fantastic. I love that. Sort of reminds me of so many movie classics that I absolutely adore. And of course, I love that moment where they're analyzing the Scoop 7, and they're getting the magnifier closer and closer and closer, just like in Blade Runner. Absolutely wonderful to see that maybe Blade Runner had this as an influence. That would be cool. And look, it's not a bad influence. Hey, I had some questions about the pilot and the plastic and all of that stuff, and a lot of that did not work for me. However, I did enjoy them trying to create more. I mean, this is like overachievement at this point, right? There is a couple rough edges, I would say, to the science, but it was always fun to listen. And I'm not a super hyper science person, but I will say that I like listening to science that makes sense to me. So that was so when it doesn't, it was like, oh, okay. But otherwise, a lot of this was really great. I love all the set. The time and the effort and the energy put into the set work, all of the practical things that were done to make the computer visuals, that was so amazing. I love the realization of learning that one of the characters had epilepsy and she was trying to hide it, and she was being mean and gruffy to everyone because she was trying to hide it. But luckily, one of the guys is so skilled and technical that he saw that and he understood what it was right away. And even though they didn't like each other, he helped her. It was great. It was a nice moment. Also, one thing that I wanted to note is that they have a lunar lab. They mention a lunar lab. So I'm like, what? I wanna know about the lunar lab. I was just really enthralled with that idea. I think so. The part that's really hard for most people, including myself, would be, of course, the pacing. The pacing is rough, but I think in a way it's charming. It's very charming. For me, I thought of like, okay, this is 1971. This is what the pacing for 1971 is. It didn't stop me from enjoying it once I remembered, oh yes, 1971. This is the pacing for this era and time. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Lathe of Heaven, The Lathe of Heaven. I love that movie so much. It was done in 1980, but it has that kind of like a flat feel to it almost, and some of the concepts are just kind of out there when it comes to story. I did enjoy that. I actually like this moment where they had the mishap of not getting their messages because of a small piece of paper caught in the machine. It's very it's like chances are things would go wrong. Murphy's Law, and I liked it. I liked it. And maybe it is maybe one thing too many, but I didn't mind it. I really didn't. It's very interesting that there's no character arcs in this. Everybody's the same coming in and out of this whole process. But I did love the character interaction. I love the fact that these characters were doing the things you expected the characters to do, and everybody was really smart about what they were doing. They didn't make mistakes because they weren't smart enough. They, like the lady, I mean, she made a mistake, but she couldn't, she had epilepsy. And so that stopped her from actually like seeing something that was right in front of her for scientific purposes. And that was something I felt like, oh, wouldn't it have been really great if she had someone like an assistant there to help her? And suppose like later on, other departments probably would have had that, but with her at the stage working alone at night, and she could have died. She could have literally died if she was in a precarious position, or she was standing and she fell. she could have died, and so that's another thing to consider. I did adore a lot of the little twists and turns in the story, and yeah, I'm a big fan now. I'm so glad that you guys told me that I needed to watch this. Yeah, I know that I've been enjoying all of the movies that you guys have been telling me to watch, and there's a couple too that I have just been curious about watching, and I knew I was going to like them, and I did. So yeah, definitely cool. I'm glad I'm able to articulate exactly why I like them too, because it's one thing to like a movie, but also it's nice to also articulate why you like the movie. And yeah, that's so much fun for me to go through all the details with you guys. And maybe it's a bit long, but I was very excited about this, and I really I really enjoyed it. I really did. Well, without further ado, I bid you adieu, and I'll see you around. Take care.